Blaine, you said about the European Union. What's the deal with the European Union?
How do
I
they survive it?
I have an answer, a
Yeah.
broad answer. They are scumbags.
Oh no, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But
But now for the
do the
detail,
scumbags make it through this? That's what I
there's
don't know.
I know they won't. They won't.
There's a more appropriate word for the Europeans, and it starts with a C and ends with a T. But as this is a family channel, I won't use it.
Tom's not here.
I've seen you use that
We'll
word before,
we'll
my brother.
pluralize it, right? But yeah.
Yes.
Europe's done. European Union's done. They're going to try one last gasp. The Devil's Legion's headquarters in Europe was the Ukraine, and it's done.
Yeah,
it's done.
it is.
Right? What
2
we're
million
trying to
dead
do
before
right
we get
now
there.
is not lead the Middle East to the same kind of slaughter, not lead South Central America to the same kind of slaughter as just happened in Ukraine. That's why we're going about it in the way that Blaine talked about. Right? We're cutting off funding. We're cutting off, government funding. We're cutting off illicit fundings. We're disarming Europe, and we've pretty much disarmed NATO.
Yep.
Spending it all in Ukraine.
Yep.
And so where are the Devil's Legions trying to go now? Well, the European, out of Ukraine is going into Canada. Qatar is trying to move to Pakistan. And Venezuela, we don't know yet, right? More than likely, they'll probably try to come here to the southwest of the United States. Okay. Because they own and control most of the governors and most of the politicians and judges, etc.
I think they'll activate cells across the country when they get pushed.
I want to stick with the EU because from my read, which doesn't have the sort of fine-grained detail that you brought in, Ian, is that the EU is going to fall apart. And why it's going to fall apart is because, well, it's structurally completely unsound, riven by disagreements, and it's a losing team. And when teams lose, they fracture more and more and more.
Well, the European Union was always an intelligence operation set up with the Marshall Plan, actually set up by the first, starting in the 1800s, with the setup for World War I that broke the empires and the imperial systems and old relationships, and then further with the destruction of World War II that further destroyed and further ended all kinds of very old relationships and structures and obligations and all of those things. And then the Marshall Plan came in and deeply embedded the financialist kill chain across all of Europe, in the form of what would go on to become, first as NATO, and then what would go on to become the European Union. It was always a Ponzi scheme. It was always a fraud and a corrupt thing from the very beginning to squeeze as much wealth out of Europe for as long as could be squeezed out.
Right. Outright theft.
Right. And at some point, what happens with parasites is they kill the host. Well, the host is dead. And now it's a matter of, does Germany get wiped off the table? Does France get wiped off the table? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, this is part of their wet dream fantasy to go ahead and fix their Ponzi scheme collateral issues by somehow dropping and balkanizing Russia and taking over 75 trillion in resources and routes. And nothing, I mean, this is the thing. The middle managers and the junior managers like Kaya Kallas, Ursula von der Leyen, Ruda, they can speak this crap. Macron can speak this crap, but they're all just script cards. And so when you see them with this bloodlust saying, yeah, we're going to bust up Russia, and it's like, you have no idea what you're talking about. And not a one of you has even held a gun.
You couldn't even bust up a brothel. Get the hell out of here.
They can't.
Right?
They can't. They can't even put down a radical protest in their own cities. And while their cities burn and they deindustrialize, and their big victory is destroying yet another nuclear power plant, they still will beat the Congas. Now they've tried. How many false flags have they tried to get this war going with the United States in it? I don't know, 7, 8, 9 major ones?
Well, and 2 of those were nuclear.
Right, that's right. That's
2 of them was their attempts were nuclear. So give me a second.
That was when there were missiles or bombs at the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was a counterproliferation guy. That's the unit I was in. And actually Blaine oversaw the European sister to the unit. So we have a little overlap there.
We do.
Give me a second. The problem that we have with Europe is that there's 2 models to keep the financialist system going. One is you have a knockdown, drag-out war where you can steal somebody else's collateral assets and recollateralize, or, which hasn't happened since World War II, or you attract a massive war in your own borders, in your own countries, that destroys everything enough that you spend the next 30, 50, 60 years, you're rebuilding. And so they don't have any concern whatsoever about gutting and destroying Europe itself. And if they can't goad the Russians into doing it, which they won't,
right.
If they can't goad the Russians into doing it, which again they won't, not even false flag, because it turns out the Russians are the best intelligence units and organizations in the world, and not by a little when it comes to human intelligence. And oh, by the way, signals intelligence as well. They're right up there with us, right? So, and they know Europe for centuries and centuries. They know the Europeans extraordinarily well. So
kept the world safe. Their intelligence, matching ours, has kept the world safe.
That is exactly right. It's what kept us from being in a nuclear war already, right? Now, unfortunately, our intelligence, particularly the human side, because we've overemphasized on technical, is trash now.
Right, it is.
And we've got to get that, we've got to improve that, but that's going to take some time. That's a generational thing. Point I'm getting at is this. Because they're not going to be able to attract Russia into, no matter what the provocations, they're not going to be able to attract Russia in to destroy themselves. They will take themselves to civil wars. And I see this thing that they just did with the 18-year-olds. They're registering all the 18-year-olds in Germany by this thing that happened through NATO and then slid through Germany somehow, which is probably not constitutional, but they got it through anyways. But generally what will happen is when a financialist regime gets to this place, they will themselves foster a revolution or civil war at home so that they can get that destruction that they need, and they can kill off enough of the native sons in a brother on brother war that one force majeure clause gets kicked in and all these derivative contracts, so they get excused, and that wipes out 90% of the debt or more. And then the war drags on, so they make additional loans and debt, start rebuilding the debt Ponzi. And they kill off enough native sons so they don't have to worry about getting torn out of their beds at night in their palaces and guillotined.
Yep, that's an expansion of Alex Kreiner's Red Ant, Black Ant model. And honestly, you should look at the insurance, because what we're seeing now on the other side, on the side that's fighting this, in addition to private banking getting hammered, and we're starting to see crumbs like I talked about. The insurance companies are in trouble, deep trouble. And so what you see is desperation, and that's when things that don't seem quite right in the news. 10 years ago, when would we ever see the UK publicly come out and make a statement that we're not going to be with the United States and that we're not going to help you in this special relationship with an intel requirement? We have those kinds of quarrels, and we have been having them forever, but we do that behind the scenes in a closet someplace and with diplomats.
This one, Blaine, we started.
Yes, we did.
The UK saying that, right? The UK government, the British freaking occupying government saying that,
right,
is a useless, nonsense, estrogen-laden statement, because when they elected the Home Secretary, we told them, we will not share intelligence with you. We said that months ago when they brought this damn lady in as the Home Secretary and the head of MI5.
Soy girl. Yep.
So now it's totally on their part. It's some low status bitch at the party finally realizing where the power lies and then trying desperately to change the narrative back to where she's in control of the conversation.
Right.
It's like, sorry, it's already too late. That was already said over there 2 hours ago.
Yep.
You're not retaking the narrative. So it's not for that statement wasn't for the United States, wasn't for us. It's for internal market. It's for,
Oh, sure.
It's to make it appear as if these folks still have some place and power in the world.
Yeah.
They're nobodies.
Yep.
They're nobodies. They're the hired help of the hired help of the hired help.
Take the first step towards online privacy. Get NordVPN.
Yeah, and Shabana Mahmood could become the next prime minister.
She could.
God forbid.
Sir Keir doesn't look like he's long for this job.
It's all. The United Kingdom is leading the step 7 of the financial skill chain, the collapse.
Yeah,
they are intentionally moving to collapse the United Kingdom.
Yep, Mark Carney's
and all the Commonwealth. That's right. All the Commonwealth, all the former. They are moving. It's Europe desperately, the EU desperately trying to collapse the Commonwealth. Right. It's not just the UK, but the whole Commonwealth. And the Commonwealth system so that Europe can have a little bit, the European Union in that parasitic system, which has been occupying the United Kingdom since 1688, can go on another decade maybe.
Yeah.
While they try to get a war, while they try to raw their men and try to stir up, this war.
That's an essential part of the plan. They have to get that war, and
they have to, and they're not going to. So
no, they're not.
What they're gonna do is they're gonna devolve into civil wars. But they will never, even if and when civil wars start in Europe, they will still continue to try for world war as their way to realign and reorient and rearm and
this
cancel.
Reset. They need it.
They need the reset. That's exactly right. What do they mean by Great Reset? That's massive cataclysmic war. And they don't care if it's nuclear.
No.
Okay. Ian, Blaine, I want you to put some stuff in, right, to add to what Ian's been saying. We'll take it somewhere else.
Well, let's get inside their heads a little bit, and this is where I have concerns.
Ew.
Your enemy needs to have a certain amount of intelligence and competence, and a lot of these people with these fancy names have really been inbred all the way down to the place where we find them today. And the reason I'm speaking about them so harshly is because it gets back to a conversation I had at a prolific think tank after hours with some of these names that would be in senior management in the Trillionaire Kids Club. And one of the snarky things that was said, and I think it's evocative of their experience levels, their understanding of warfare, their understanding of fifth generation warfare, or their lack of it. I'm not saying they don't have smart field generals, they do. But one of the snarks said, if there's ever a world war, we ever have a problem, it's our class that will ultimately survive because we've got these yachts, planes, we can get to the bunkers we have them all over the world. Yeah. And I just laughed. And I was a colonel at the time. They said, why are you laughing? And I said, I just think that's cute. I think your imaginary sense of security is awfully endearing, actually. And so the Warburg looked at me and said, what do you mean? What did I say that was wrong? And I said, don't you have a security detail? And he said, of course. And I said, and I'm going to guess that they're made up of former SAS, maybe 75th Ranger Regiment, maybe Gurkhas, that kind of troop, right? They're like, yes. And they're very loyal. And I go, uh-huh. So you create a world where we go to Mad Max, their families get laid to waste, and you think you survive in that world. You think that you're important and necessary in that world. But what actually ends up happening here is they offer you the ability to be the butler, or they just drop a cap into your head and you're finished. Or somebody comes along with their thermographic equipment that you can get for very cheap and finds your air hole or your water hole and you're done. And so I guess the alarm that this young one had about how in 5 seconds I could defeat any semblance of security that he had in the world, he didn't understand any of that. And in my experience, as I've grown older, became a general, got into business, built businesses, been around a lot of bankers, when they lack, and EM does this so much better than I do, but when they lack any awareness, they think violence is something you subcontract out. When they lacked any awareness of what brute force, no shit, GI, there are no rules here, war, then they have a blind spot. And what bothers me about all that, and I'll get to my point, is what bothers me about that is that means they're making decisions with that blind spot, and they can make bad decisions that get everybody hurt because they don't get it. And I'd love to pop a few of them into Central Asia to find out what a real revolution looks like, because like where I was at in Kyrgyzstan, when they're wonderfully lovely people, but when they go to violence, man, it is not professional. It is not professional. And those are things you never want to see again. I don't ever want to see what I saw there again. But there's a whole class of these rarefied air breathers who are overly confident. They're overly arrogant, overly egotistical. But they made a big mistake when they sent me and EM and those like us to unending war for 30 straight years. We picked up a few skills, some understanding, and now when you apply that to business, it's you guys have some problems. But I'm worried that you're going to make really crappy decisions because you're not qualified to be doing the things that you're doing, no matter how diabolical or evil.
And unfortunately, though, the people who, so they're sitting in front of the high table, the John Wick reference, like Tom
Yep.
Luongo likes to say,
Mhm.
they're sitting as supplicants in front of the table. They're not
Yep.
sitting at the table. And there's not even the owners, right? Because the ones sitting at the table, taking supplicants, are not the ones that own the table. And
Right.
unfortunately, the ones sitting at the table, taking supplicants, and the ones who own the table are actually quite capable.
Right. And that's your target list.
And that's the target list, because they're the ones that are intentionally, and this is what happens in step 7 of the financialist kill chain, late stage empire, late stage economy, whatever you want to call it, right?
Mhm.
This is what happens, is they steadily put more and more and more incompetent, maniacal people into positions of authority and power, so that they're not competent and they're not capable, and they take the blame for all of it, and they're borderline personality disorders, right? Whichever schedule. And so they're
Yep.
easily manipulatable.
Oh, that's
You
exactly
just
right.
feed their egos, you feed their whatever their type on the schedule list, whether it's list 1 or list 2 or whatever it's called, type 1, type 2 or whatever.
Right.
Borderline personality disorder, that's what you do. And I've watched it in corporations, I've watched it in all kinds of things. It's what you do when a institution has already collapsed and failed.
It's true. Tactically, I had to ward off a business colleague who was enamored with the name of the billionaire that was going to go meet with him. And I said, "Don't you have these views?" And he said, "Yeah." "And don't you publicly get up on social media and say these things?" "Yeah." "And aren't you politically inclined?" "Yeah." "Why would you ever meet with that individual by yourself in a room?" And no, he's not coming to do business with you. He gave me the whole setup, and I'm happy to help people like this, but there are so many good people, Rich, and I'm going right to you because you talked about opening up the refrigerator and looking at the creepy crawlies and the scorpions and all of the snakes. There are so many good people who are highly intelligent, but the idiom or the rule, Occam's razor, whatever you're looking at, that's probably what it is. It doesn't apply in fifth generation warfare. In fact, you're safer just going, whatever I'm looking at, that's not what it is. And there are so many good people that, in a tactical way, I try to be helpful to go, please don't be naive about the people that you meet with. If you go to this place, please start to develop some skills about how you move and walk around. Don't think if you're a public person and you talk that you're not a signal in the fog that somebody is attracted to, and it might not be the right person.
Okay.
It's going to get sporty.
Thank you both. Let me say something about what I'm getting out of this, and perhaps the viewer might be getting, or perhaps even getting more. So there's the Great Reset, fronted by middle manager Klaus Schwab, right? And they're assaulting us from all sorts of directions: the open borders, the trans agenda, the sexualization of children, climate change nonsense, pathogens, a really novel and safe and effective medical intervention, which we were smart enough not to take, right? And the capture of ruling parties and opposition parties in the political sphere, and the capture of judges, and the partnership with large corporations, the censorship. So being assaulted on all sorts of fronts. And then when you were laying out what's happening with Venezuela, and I'm thinking about Epstein and Gaza and how Trump's closed the borders in the US, it seems to me that, and also I suspect Russia and Trump and Putin are working in partnership to destroy the European Union and the UK together, right?
Well, I think China's involved too. I think she's involved in that as well.
In the background, supporting them, right?
And really, there's a balance right now of greater India. If India is going to join in that, but
But to drain and destroy NATO and the European Union and the UK militarily and financially. So there's a counter war that's a sort of anti-5th-generation warfare on all these other fronts. And I think the mistake that people are making, as people made with the Great Reset, is they didn't connect things. They didn't see how the lockdown was connected to training us to be compliant, and also catching those that weren't compliant, and beginning the destruction of small businesses and resilience. They didn't connect everything. So then I don't know if I'm connecting everything, because I didn't open up and look what was inside the fridge, that cesspit of scorpions and snakes. And
you said the E word, the Epstein word.
Yes.
And that's been, so here's my thing on President Trump and the Epstein crap and how big and broad-shouldered they were with thumping their chest. We're going to come in here. We're going to expose everything. We're going to leave no rock unturned. And all of a sudden, no, he really did kill himself. And there's nothing to see here. There was no list, kids. Go away. It's a hoax. So,
hi everybody. This is Alex Kreiner. Please follow Crypto Rich. He is one of the best in his business, the pioneer of ending wars through tax non-compliance. Oh, fuck it.
Oh, that was great. Alex goes up and we got an F-bomb.
That's right. Surprise.
So, first off, the warfare here politically in the United States is unlike anything it's ever been. It is a blood sport. And if they've tried to do everything in the world to go get Trump, they've shot at him, they've lawfared him, they've tried to bankrupt him, take everything, threaten his kids, everything. So my assumption, and I could be wrong, and I'm open to being wrong, my assumption is that beyond a little embarrassment here and there, I don't really see President Trump nearly as a co-opted figure in the Epstein saga as I see in this war that we're talking about, Rich, that it's an inconvenient thing for that issue to be dealt with right now because of the people that he's working with, and he's got a pacing in a different manner that makes the Epstein, its list, all of that stuff possibly a distraction that takes us off the target. And so the confirmation of that I'm waiting for is, will the opposition party in our country, the Democrats, or even part of the Republicans too, start to go demand all Epstein everything accountability
2 days ago.
exposure? Go ahead.
2 days ago, the Democrats did exactly that. Democratic senators or congressmen.
So there we are. And that's, but I think what this is, and I think there's other things about this too, because there's people on the Trump team that I know that are not on the Trump team, not really. And so I think that there's things that we would like to see happen accountability wise, major arrests, but I think there's some sort of sequencing or pacing issue. They understand how the base of President Trump is running away from him at the speed of heat, and I don't think they care. I think they're absolutely more focused on the campaign.
I don't think the base is running away from him. I think a lot of that's noise.
Yeah,
there's a lot.
Yeah, you're right. You're probably right.
I think most of all that's noise. But I want to go back to exactly what is the pacing. Well, the pacing is exactly what I articulated. Okay, if you are going to go after the most dangerous, powerful people on earth, you don't go straight after them first.
Right.
What do? First thing you do is you take their ability to launch nuclear war off the table. That's World War III. The second thing that you do is you go after their illicit funding and their self-funding paramilitary operations. That's the cartels. Then you go after the high net worth people, the very powerful, the owners of the table, right? The ones who sit at the table and the owners of the table, two different groups. Then you go after them. You can't start the other way around because they will launch World War III and nuclear war, or they will launch cartels and jihadis and everybody else. Because the cartels and jihadis, by the way, they're the same. The only difference between the cartels and jihadis out there in the world is that the jihadis are funded through the Islamic world and donations and crime and other things. And the cartels are funded through drugs and human trafficking. And there's a big overlap. All the time. And there's a big overlap between the two of them. So that's, I just call them the devil's legions now. It's just all of those elements as the same thing. They are doing so when you are doing a war, you do an order of battle. And the first order of battle here is they had to take World War III off the table. That's been being done in the last 10, 11 months in brilliant fashion. Yeah, and it's pretty much off the table completely now. Yeah. The next stage is they had to go after this illicit funding and financing networks. Well, guess what? That does impact eastern Afghanistan and western Pakistan and down into Balochistan, etc. That's a whole corridor of drugs and weapons and people and everything else. So the next order of business, back to the Epstein thing, once you can take the self-funding paramilitary, take World War III off the table, take the self-funding paramilitaries off the table, or as much as you can. As you're doing that, you're also getting people, you are making deals with people who are going to turn on other people. Because again, we are a common law system, and we have to understand how all of this stuff, when it happens, isn't going to just be showing up to somebody's house on the list and putting a bullet in their brain. They're going to go into the court system. And if you're going to take not just the people who own the table or sit at the table, but people who work for those people and you're going to put them in fucking, forget my language, but you're going to put them in jail or prison, you better make it stick. Because if you miss on any one of those, that's going to create precedents in the legal system and arguments that other defendants are going to use. Not just on the initial lawsuits, but on
you can let the whole army
criminal
get
action, but on appeals.
Yep.
Right? So what we have to understand is when we move against that, we've got to have the legal stuff right. And they've been, since the very beginning, before Epstein was ever arrested, dirtying and clouding all of that stuff up right from the beginning, because that's how we do things in the intelligence world.
Right.
When we're doing an operation, the whole child and human trafficking stuff was cover for action and status. Cover for action and status of what? All of this money laundering that's going on from government. It's, all of this massive money laundering back to judges and senators and congressmen, et cetera. That's what actually, look at Epstein. That's actually what he did at Bear Stearns. That's why Bear Stearns let him go. It's what he learned from, Bill Barr's father, et cetera, right? So that's why the order of battle, World War III off the table, paramilitary is off the table because that's terrorist activities and widespread terrorist activities that they were threatening us with. That's what Sarah Adams was and all these others, right? And you take that self-funded paramilitaries off the table, you best you can. That's Qatar, that's Waziristan, that's Nigeria, actually, that's Venezuela, etc. And while you're doing that, you're doing, back to something Blaine said earlier, you're doing all of this signal intelligence and you're doing threat finance intelligence.
Right.
And you're getting lower level people, maybe who are inculcated in the bad stuff that happened on the human trafficking or the money laundering sides, the criminality sides there, and you get them to roll on people so that you have the cases. When you bring the legal cases, they're going to stick. Okay. Because when they move against these powerful people, it's not just that they're powerful and dangerous, it's that if they fail through the legal system to bring these people to justice, there will be revolution.
Right.
Because the American peoples, the European people, some European peoples, Europeans are not as stupid and dumb and naive as, they went through 2 world wars last century and they don't necessarily want to do another one, or civil wars, right?
Yeah.
And so, give me 1 second. So that's, the thing that people are not looking at is that to move against those guys, there's an order of precedent you have to do first, right, as I laid out. But when you do the legal action, if these people skirt through, who have the best lawyers in the world, they have all the money in the world, they have all the time in the world, they have all kinds of people, judges and everybody else, politicians who owe them things, right, owe them everything. Why do you think politicians and public servants have been getting so wealthy in the last 20 years?
Yep.
Right? So I'll stop here. If this fails in the legal system, then there's no social contract anymore that anybody, and it goes to blood in our own countries. Yeah,
Blaine?
terribly sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. Blaine, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, he's got it exactly right. But the only place where I think we're not out of the woods yet, and it's only because the border here in the United States was left open for 4 years, is that every terror organization, the cartels, you've got People's Liberation Army, GRU, you've got IRGC all over. And I guess what I would be very watchful for is as these operations go forward, they outnumber the hell out of us. And all of our forces are overseas mostly. And our first responders, the police, the fire department, what I'm trying to promote here locally and around the country is you've got to be ready to protect your own. You've got to be ready to come together as neighborhoods. And, you guys in Europe are already seeing that. If you go to Ireland, it's unbelievable. But my friends in Ireland, I've got a retired major there who's a dear friend of mine, and he is like, you're right. It's block to block. We have to know our neighbors and we have to know what they'll do and what they won't do. It's resilience.
I talked to that same friend this morning, by the way.
That's right.
Maybe I should talk to that same friend and invite him. I just want to, we're going to come to the US. I just want to say something about Epstein, where I think how it fits in with what you're talking about, Ian. So the Democrats, Biden had all the files and everything for the 4 years, all the emails, they didn't release any of it. Instead, they tried this nonsense lawfare against Trump, and they tried to shoot him and failed. And I think this is, I'm speculating here, but I think this is a sting operation by Trump.
Yes.
So Jessica Giuffre is on record saying that she never saw Trump there. Okay, well maybe he went when she wasn't there. But then also there was the attorney in 2009 when Epstein was being investigated by Florida, who said that Trump was the only person who came forward and gave evidence or gave a deposition or whatever it was, right? Gave a statement who was helpful. Then Trump also closed the borders and has empowered the military to deal with child trafficking. That's not consistent with someone has a predilection for children. You know, they'd want to.
Can I add an element?
Available.
Can I add an element here?
Please.
I've got breaking news for you. It just hit just now. President Trump just put out one of his famous truths on his social media.
I'll come to that. Hold on a second.
Oh, you've already seen it. You've already seen it.
I've already seen it, right? So then what he does, he says, yes, we're going to release the Epstein files, He gets into power. There's this rush they're going to get released. And then he says, we're not going to release it. Well, what does that provoke? That provokes the Democrats and the anti-Trump forces to say, no, you've got to release it. You've got to release it. You've got to release it, right? Otherwise, it's because you're in there. And what did the Democrats do the other day? They released some selected emails. What was it, the Thanksgiving thing that Trump had Epstein for lunch 2017 on Thanksgiving. Well, actually, there's official records that he was with veterans on that day. So then the DNC, they deleted that tweet. The email of this woman, this anonymous woman saying, yes, she saw Trump all the time and everything and had long conversations. They redacted her name, turned out to be Jessica Giuffre, who never said any such thing. She actually said, no way, I never saw him. But there's all this clamor and all the emails. We're supposed to rely on Jeffrey Epstein's word. How Trump is a bad man. So we should rely on the word of this notorious pedophile, that what he's got to say about somebody who gave evidence against him is somehow reliable.
So
everybody's clamoring in that Truth Social post. Okay, we're now going to investigate Clinton and Gates and the others, the high net worth individuals,
the people who sit at the table.
Yes,
and neither one of those are owners of the table. They're both sit at the table. Right. Okay. So I want to run something by you guys. Okay. This has been something that's been in my mind for some time. I met the Trump team many, many years ago, back in the early 2000s when I helped build a boutique investment bank. And we sold that to, well, the partners, not me. I was the lower level guy in the firm.